recording later on. The chat is open if you want to post anything in the chat. That's absolutely fine. We will keep an eye on that. Paul has shared that he is happy for people to ask questions and comment during the session. So if I can ask everyone just to stay on mute while Paul is talking, just to avoid any background noise. But then if you do have a question or you want to jump in at any point, just take yourself off mute or raise your hand. And I will now pass over to Paul. Thank you, Paul.
It's a pleasure. Good morning, everyone. So before I start, I ought to mention that there's a few of the clients that I work with are in attendance today, and just to make it clear that whilst the booking suggested it was raffle training, it isn't raffle training in DonorFlex. This is really just a fireside chat about my experiences running raffles, and both with me actually running the raffles or as part of a team running raffles, or working with clients who are running raffles. And I just didn't want anyone to think that there was going to be lots of DonorFlex in here. There might be a couple of screenshots, but we're talking about raffles, not DonorFlex. So, and again, I wasn't aware of the knowledge levels, whether people are already running raffles. So I thought we'll start right at the basics and just mention that typically from my experiences, I see 4 different types of raffle going on. The most basic is where people send out tickets in a mass mailing that's going out, and they've got no knowledge of who those tickets went to. And whilst that might raise some money, there's no strategy there to be able to build on that and to grow that raffle, because you don't know who's had the tickets and not necessarily who's even bought them if you're just folding the tickets and popping them in a drum. So there is an option, and I have worked with clients who have no track back, and as the tickets come back in through the door, they have somebody keying those into Excel so that they do have knowledge of who's bought the tickets. To my mind, you're just pushing the cost of the camera matching to have the ticket, the trackback file, further down the line. And the cost of that isn't necessarily the hourly rate of the staff that are keying that. It's the loss of what they could have been doing to raise money if they weren't keying names and addresses into an Excel spreadsheet. Most common is tickets with trackback files, and they either, if you have raffle software, the software would be loaded with that trackback file, and you'd be able to process the ticket sales and any donations in there. If not, I see that as Excel spreadsheets again, where you'd probably put an index field in that file that represents a number that's going to go through a random number generator, and so that you've closed that loop of who's bought which tickets and which number went through the draw in order to pick those winners. Ticketless but paper-based raffles are, I think, more common because there's no costs with trackback files. There's no cost with camera matching, so the trackback file is free. And again, I think that tends to be a pack that has a message saying you've been issued tickets 1 to 25, and at the bottom there's a little tear-off slip that says, I'd like to buy all my tickets. I'd like to buy the first 20, the first 15, the first 10, the first 5, or other. And then the virtual raffle, where there are no tickets, physical, and it's all done typically in your software. And that your website will either issue raffle tickets. That's the ideal world, if it can issue the numbers, because there's part of the receipting of the transaction, it can also deliver a lawful ticket with all those bits of information that make that a lawful ticket: the promoter, the date of the draw, the cost of the tickets, etc. And you then don't have to communicate with them. If your website can't issue ticket numbers, then you will have to issue those ticket numbers yourself and then communicate with that purchaser to tell them what the ticket numbers are. So there's a level of administration in there that makes life more difficult. And then, of course, you can have combinations of those. And I have clients that do have combinations of ticketed, ticketless, and virtual. And that all seems to work very well together. So that's just very basic, the 4 main types of raffle that I see. The stages of the raffle are much more important. Planning, those that run raffles will be used to doing that. Administration, handling the responses. The bit that I often see missing is the analysis, and that really is a key bit of it. So in your planning, you first have to decide on the type of raffle. Is it going to be a virtual raffle or a ticketless raffle? Is this draw going, assuming you run a lottery, which I'm sure you all do, is this going to be a standalone raffle, or are you going to inflate your normal weekly draw? Because that has the benefits of part funding the prizes. And then data selection, who you're going to who you're actually going to mail. And that will be undoubtedly your lottery players, maybe your cancelled lottery players, maybe your regular givers, those that have donated in the last 3 years and given more than £10 maybe. And would you consider buying cold data? Now, I think people tend to be frightened of cold data now, but I have checked and it is still perfectly lawful to buy it. And at the hospice that I worked at, we bought cold data, and some years we'd buy 10,000 names. We'd send our database off to the fulfillment house. They would profile our data, tell us who Dorothy Donor was, and typically it's a woman in her 60s who isn't necessarily in the highest social bracket. And we would then buy 10,000 names that matched that profile, and we'd send them the same pack that everybody got, because we knew that these people are like our average donor. We might buy another 10,000 names where they're profiled to be between 35 and 45 and are interested in competitions, and we might send to them a pack that makes more of the prize and less of the cause, whereas our Dorothy Donor pack will make much of the cause and a little about the prize. So cold data is worth considering, and we'll look at why that might be in a little while. And then how do you segment the data for reporting? So yeah. So I know for a fact that there's one organisation in the audience who does a really good job of segmenting their data, and they have lots of segments so that they can measure the response of people based on how they have been supporting the hospice in the past. So they might have, as in this example here, a cohort of people who play the lottery, have a regular giving agreement and make a donation. And then another cohort where they play the lottery and just a regular giver, but haven't made an ad hoc donation in the last 3 years, and so on. So that can lead to quite a lot of segments, but it does allow you to measure who it is that's responding and what your relationship is like with them in the run up to that. And I had argued in the past that if you have software where this information is in the same database as your raffle, you can run an inquiry to find everybody that's in the raffle who is also a lottery player and a regular giver. But of course, I was missing the point that they might be a regular giver now when I'm running the inquiry, but they weren't at the point at which the campaign went out. So that sort of segmenting is really useful. You can see that I'm talking about different packs there, with a main pack and a donation pack. And that's really what I mentioned with the cold mailing data that we might buy, that we might have more than one pack. And pack design is something that should be tweaked. So, and as long as you can measure what those pack designs are delivering, you can get really useful information. So the very first time the hospice that I worked with decided to do some testing on packs, we worked with Clive Mollett, who some of you may know from the Lotteries Council, sadly deceased. And he suggested that, as we had always sent out effectively ticketless draws, but we had a printed A3 sheet that was folded in half to an A4 sheet with the pack on the first two sides of that A4 sheet, and the second side had the tickets, and there was a perforated slip, so you could actually tear tickets off and potentially sell them to other people. That's the big downside of a ticketless paper-based draw, is there is no opportunity to sell those tickets on. So this achieved that. So with Clive's help, we sent 4 packs. The main pack went out with 5 tickets, which is what we'd always sent, but we had 3 segments of 5% of the data where we sent the same thing but with 10 tickets on, and then we sent a pack with a separate book of 5 tickets and a pack with a separate book of 10 tickets to see which responded the best. And out of that, the 5 tickets, the sheet with 5 tickets on had the best response rate and the highest donation value, but the pack with 10 physical tickets in the pack achieved the best results. So the greatest sales. So the following year, we majored on tickets, 10 tickets in a mailing, and we started testing other things. And that might be different pictures. So every year after that, or every draw after that, for quite a few draws, we did testing, and we would send 80 or 85% the pack that performed best last year, and we'd have 3 segments of 5% where we would send them different colour feel, or a different photograph, or a different message. And each time we would measure the results, and for the next draw we'd send whichever pack performed the best. And because of that testing, I can confidently say that red as a colour feel outsold every other colour at Christmas, which probably isn't a surprise. But in the summer, it undersold every other colour, and a turquoise colour performed best, followed by a primrose yellow. And those colour differences made a substantial difference. So just gentle tweaking of your pack design might produce surprising results. But I would never commit an entire mailing to something entirely new, because it might not work. And I had two clients a good few years back suddenly change their raffle types from ticketed to ticketless paper-based raffles, and one of them saw absolutely no effect at all, but the other, the income was substantially down. And that's a risk you take if you put your entire pot at risk in that way. So I would always suggest test, and measure. You must have a mechanism to measure the results. Prize considerations. Is it going to be a cash prize? Is it going to be an asset? Is it going to be an experience? And can you get prize sponsorship? So for several years, we had a relationship with the local Fiat garage, and we had a Fiat 500 as the first prize, and Fiat UK paid 33% of the cost. The dealership paid 33% of the cost. So we got a prize worth 10, 11,000 for 4,000, 3,500, 4,000 pounds. So that sort of prize sponsorship is well worth investigating. And I was surprised how keen they were to sponsor the prize for multiple years. Stake. I've recently had a client run a totally virtual raffle with a £5 stake. That was last year. This year they've gone for a £2 stake, and that didn't surprise me, but did seem to surprise them that £5 was a little too much. Having said that, a client I work with has a £300 stake for their raffle. They are not a gambling commission controlled client, so it's a £300 stake. They sell only 5,000 tickets, which brings in £1.5 million, but they have a top prize of £1 million for their annual raffle. But that for them works extremely well. But I don't think the Gambling Commission would be quite so happy with that, maybe. And how many tickets do you issue? I was advised by BrightSource that 12 is a number you should always avoid. If you currently send 10 tickets, send 15. If you want to grow your raffle, 12 didn't give enough sales to offset the loss. But increasing the number of tickets being sent is a way of increasing the income. So it's worth mentioning that the hospice that I worked with, on the first draw I worked on, was one draw a year, and it brought in £50,000 to £60,000. And the first thing we did was introduce a second draw, fully expecting that both draws would bring in less money than the 50, 60,000 that we had seen, but we just doubled the money, so it made no difference at all. And then we started this program of testing what was working, what wasn't working. We remained at 2 draws, and we would buy data, cold data, and over the course of 5 years, that 50 to 60,000 got up to very nearly £250,000. And that is the difference that testing and building on success and measuring. Some of the benefits of measuring is you can stop sending to people that aren't buying them because it's costing you money and annoying them. So identifying those is as important as identifying those that maybe will buy more tickets so that you could send them more tickets. Oops. So always, I would suggest, ask for top-up donations. Always include a gift aid form. I'm sure this is telling people how to suck eggs. And think carefully about your draw date and time. Avoid the summer holiday. Be careful about bank holidays and leave enough time for people to respond, but don't leave so much time that people will receive the mailing and say, oh, it doesn't need to go back for 3 months. I'll put it on the mantelpiece and it'll get lost. And again, working with Bright Source as it was at the time, I think they're gone now. Their analysis of all the clients they worked with proved that between 7 to 9 weeks was optimal. So that was the range that we always went with. Do you do an early bird draw? We never found it necessary. We always found that we were inundated with responses for the first 3 to 4 weeks. Then there'd be a lean period for a couple of weeks, and then the last couple of weeks we'd be quite busy again. But we would do follow-ups to the mailings, and normally that would be items in the newspaper or local radio shout-outs. These days you'd no doubt do social media shout-outs. So then we come to the administration. If there's no trackback file, you're either keying data into Excel or folding tickets and getting no benefit from that. All other raffle types, as it says, should allow you to process those returns in a simple way. And for virtual raffles, it should be either entirely dealt with via imports, and hopefully if your website can issue the ticket numbers, that's all there is to do, or via an API. And I was fortunate enough to work with a client who's now running their 3rd or 4th totally virtual raffle, hands-off raffle. So they set up the raffle type, and then their website deals with the sales of the tickets, takes the payment upon receipt of the fact that the payment was successful. It issues the raffle tickets, and then it pushes those tickets into the database. And it was the first time I'd had experience of the API working in DonorFlex, and it was quite magical to look at their database and watch these transactions just appearing in there. So all they did was set up the raffle at the beginning and run the draw at the end and send out the winners, and then the analysis, obviously. So if you want an easy life, the best raffle obviously is a virtual raffle, but you need to have the reach with your social media and emails to be able to make that worthwhile. And for most of the clients I work with, the virtual is an add-on to a ticketed or a paperless raffle. I think that there is only one that's run totally virtual raffles. So, sorry, I was going to say, if it is a paper-based raffle, then in an ideal world, you'll find that the vast majority of ticket sales come back and they've bought all the tickets and they've paid by check. And then you'll have a whole batch of them where they've bought all the tickets and they will have made a donation. And if you've sent 15 tickets, there's probably going to be a common donation of £5. And then you'll have odds and sods where they've bought all the odd tickets and made a £1 donation. So it's a good idea to put those in batches so that you've got piles of returns where all of the returns are identical. They've all bought them and they've all paid by cheque, or they've all bought them and they've all got a £5 donation. And that sounds a little complicated in paper because that was the paper that we used to the flowchart to decide which pile the tickets were supposed to go in. It's common sense, really, once you've read it once, and I'm not going to leave it up there for everyone to read. But in reality, that looks like that. And one of the clients I worked with allowed me to take that photograph to show how they get a volunteer to pop the returns in each of these boxes so that they can then set the defaults in the database and process the transactions. And for completeness, that's what that would look like in our software. And if you've got Raffles software, I'm sure that it would look fairly similar, where we can say we're going to auto process them. They've bought them all. So they've bought all the tickets and they've bought them all, and they've all made a £20 donation. And how that's going to be coded, whether the sales are remote or non-remote, because that's just as important in Raffle as it is in lottery, and whether or not there's a problem with the that return. So it may be that someone said, I'm buying the tickets this time, but I don't want them again. So we'd be able to say, for this batch of 10, they've all said that. So we'll pop a problem on of don't want again, and that allows a mailing opt-out for Raffle tickets in future to make sure we don't accidentally mail them again. And the beauty of having software, or even if that's your Excel spreadsheet, is if you can put a barcode of the ticket numbers on your tickets or your response slips, because that just allows you to blip the barcode, and once these defaults are set, if I had a ticket and I blipped it, it would sell the tickets and put the £20 donation on. I could grab the next ticket, blip it, and it would sell the tickets and put the donation on. Grab the next book and blip it, and so on. So it makes that response really quick and easy. So barcode is best friend. Once I discovered barcodes, I realized that I'd been missing a trick because we could use them everywhere. So lottery reminder letters would go out with a barcode of the play number on. The Light Up a Life campaign could go out with a barcode of the donor number on, and that meant that whenever a response was coming back in whatever format, we could blip a barcode and process the monies. And the beauty is, as I've put on there, they never transpose the numbers, assuming you have good quality print. And you can print them yourself. You can download a font from the internet called Font 3 of 9 or Font 39, you sometimes see it as. And if you're going to print them yourself and buy barcodes, as you print the number, you have to have an asterisk in front of it and behind it as a start and stop character. And as I say, you can print them, and a barcode reader is just a keyboard. So it works with all software. If you're in Excel, you can blip a barcode, it will put that number in Excel, Word, whatever. And they're £15. If you don't do anything else, get yourself a barcode reader. And then after administration, the draw. And either a drum, and I just don't see the point of that, or your random number generator and finding your winners. And if I just go back a couple, you will see on there that there is a little tick box to say sold on to third party. That was something that was introduced, which we introduced at the hospice that I worked at, because we had hundreds of prizes, and typically we would inflate our weekly draw rather than have a separate raffle, and so that the first prize money went towards buying the car. And on Christmas Eve, when you're running the Christmas raffle and you've got hundreds of prizes to find, the last thing you want to do is to be going through boxes and boxes of tickets to try and find those that have been sold on to somebody else. So having a tick box to say, we know these tickets were sold on, and therefore, if that's not ticked, we know those tickets were not sold on, means we know which ones we had to find. And that meant that we only found those with the tick boxes and a sample of others, so that we could convince ourselves that we had done our processing correct, but we didn't have to find them all before we went home. So that sort of little nicety is really useful when it comes to finding prizes if you have a lot of them. Sorry, my mouse has gone mad. So I thought I'd put up a screen of some analysis on a raffle that was run where we'd bought some cold data, and there were some. So I've put 2 red dots on there. Those 2 red dots are anomalies, because you can see that there were only 30 packs and 19 packs sent, and they were sent and used specifically because we knew we'd sell them. So that 92% and 50.79% are anomalies, and you can ignore them. This was where we were just testing to see how people supported us, affected how they bought, and unsurprisingly, the lottery came out on top at 33.3% of people that were sent packs, and it was, as you can see, the vast majority of the database, a third of them bought their tickets. And some of them even took on extra memberships as part of the mailing. What surprised me is even though it shouldn't have, because they'd cancelled in the last year, the K is the cancelled lottery plays, and we mailed some of those, and we only got an 8.57%, but 14 people did rejoin. But I did expect that to be higher. I think the most surprising thing are these 2 appeals ones, where we've got an appeals Y is 24.52% and appeals N is 13.29%. The only difference between those 2 is a gift aid declaration. And that shows you the power of a gift aid declaration. Somebody signing something to tie themselves to you can have a profound effect. The cold mailing, we can see that 7.68%, which is, I was told, was a very good response rate from a cold mailing, and 45 new members at that point in time. So that was people that had joined as a result of the mailing going out, because we not only asked for donations, we also asked if people would like to join the lottery. But all of those that responded from the cold mailing, in the early days, we would write to them and say either, well done, you won, would you like to join the lottery? Or, thank you for playing, sorry you didn't win, would you like to join the lottery? And from those mailings, we'd get 150, 180 new members from those responses. Further on, we decided to try telephoning instead. So we'd send the cold mailing data back to the organisation we bought them from, got them to append the telephone numbers and send them back to us. And we phoned them, and we were getting nearly 300. Or sometimes, I think on one year we got over 300 new members on one draw from phoning those people and thanking them for joining, for playing. So thanking is important, and following up is also really important. And we can see that the overall return on investment was £4.30 for every pound we spent. The cost of the mailings went down over time because we stopped sending to people that weren't buying them, because that is just wasted money. And if I just go on to the next screen, that shows how, sorry, there we go, how that sort of analysis looks. These are not real figures because this is a test database that I have, and I poured nearly £200,000 worth of transactions in, well, over £200,000 worth of transactions, just to see what would happen if I could break it. And it didn't break it, thankfully. Put all the money on, but we can see that we can start to measure whether different packs produce better results based on measuring. But to measure, we've got to have segments that allow us to differentiate between what pack was sent and therefore which pack, what it was that made the difference. That web refer a friend was an interesting one. One of the air ambulances I worked with did a virtual part of their raffle, and they had a thing where they said, give this code to your friends, get them to buy tickets, and you'll go into an additional draw. So that allowed them to capture that information, but it allowed, again, a measure of how many people, how many sales were as a result of that referring a friend. So obviously this isn't real data. I've just put that in there to remind me to say, if you're going for a virtual raffle, it's something to consider. And then the important thing after the raffle is your analysis and choosing your who to send to next year and how to manage that. So one of the important things is to be able to analyze people. So I could analyze people who have participated in a particular draw for the last 1, 2, 3, 4, however many draws I want. And I can say for in each of those years, find me everybody who sold is an odd terminology, we'll blame the programmers for that, bought 100% of their tickets and who sold their tickets onto third parties, because, and that's another use for that, sold onto third party, not just find the winners, but also we can now target people we know are happy to go out and sell their tickets. So they've bought all their tickets, they sold them onto third parties, let's send them more next time. Or they've bought all their tickets and made a £10 donation, let's send them more next time and see what happens. So that ability to be able to respond to what has happened, to influence what's going to happen, is really, really important. And there we go, because I always talk quickly and because I haven't been distracted and gone off on a tangent talking about things like Ronnie Corbett would have, if for those older people in the audience. I've pretty much gone through it. I just wanted to say main takeaways: test, test, test. Always measure responses. So implement some mechanism for measuring responses so that you can make decisions based on analysis, and buy some barcode readers because they are wonderful. And that's about it, really. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Paul. Really, really interesting, and thank you for sharing your experience.
You're muted, I think, or I can't hear you. Maybe I can't hear anybody.
Can you hear me now?
Is it just me that can't hear?
Thanks, Gloria. Yes, so Gloria
it's
can
just
hear
me that can't hear.
So thank you to Paul. I'm sure we'll all agree that was a really interesting session. Has anybody got any questions, anything that you'd like to ask out loud? Feel free to just speak out, pop your hand up, pop anything in the chat. There was a question earlier on from Joanne. I'm just going to check if Paul can hear us. I know he could at the start of the session because we chatted before we started, so I'm just going to check if we can get Paul. Looks like he's checking his wires.
Sorry, Tracy, I can't.
So what we might do then is, I'll see if we can get hold of Paul in the chat.
I mean, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I'll go out and come back in if you can hear me.
Right, so Paul's going to leave and come back in.
Okay.
Just give him a couple of sessions. Just a couple of seconds, sorry. While Paul's just gone out and come back in, I can see Gloria's popped a question in there. Kay's popped a question in there. Anybody else wants to pop a question in? I'll come back to all of them. Have a look. Do you think I will come to your question, Gloria? Really interesting one, because I think the colour of packs is a really interesting question. I've been on a training before where this has come up, and I think it's fascinating that the colour can make a difference. Okay, let's bring Paul back in.
I can hear.
You can hear us now. Excellent.
Sorry about that.
Excellent. No, not a problem. So I'm going to go to Joanne first, because Joanne, you put your hand up and you posted a question earlier on as well.
Yeah, that's all good. I was just trying to work out your raffles you do, Paul. Are you part of a lottery team that does, so is that part of your lottery offering, a raffle, or do you have your lottery in one department and your raffle kind of? So for us here, I've got a lottery team that run their lotteries, and then I do my raffle. I do it based on the fundraising data that I've got from a fundraising point of view, rather than through the lottery. So I just wondered what your split was.
So I now work for DonorFlex, providing software but at the hospice that I worked at, the raffle was run in the lottery department, and that was partly so that we could inflate the weekly draw. But we worked very close. We worked very hard to bring the silos together. So the fundraising director at the hospice was very forward-thinking, and she, where we had silos of appeals, lottery, and shops, she brought us together so that the lottery, we had collection rounds in our lottery. The lottery collectors would go out with T-shirts on saying, for the midnight walk. So in the run-up to the midnight walk, they go out in midnight walk T-shirts, and they'd be carrying midnight walk leaflets so that they could give them out. The shops would be promoting the midnight walk. The shops would allow us to sell, have a canvasser there to sell lottery single tickets or memberships. And when the lottery canvasser was at a shop's site, the single tickets that were sold shot up enormously. So there was, real benefits to working together in that way.
Mm-hmm. And just one more quick question, because I know someone else has got question about the colours. But based on the fact you said about you bought in cold data, was the cost of that? So I could see you raised a decent amount from the people playing the cold data, the people from the cold data playing the raffle. Was the cost, did it out? Oh my goodness, I can't speak. Sorry.
Yes,
Did the cost of the data outweigh what was donated from them?
it did. So
It did.
the data cost 10p a head. So and then there was the mailing costs on top, obviously, but the fact that we got sort of 300 new members out of it, more than paid for it without the raffle income, and 7% raffle income covered it. So it was a really well worthwhile investment. So so you also, if you do buy cold names, you have to capture the details of those that don't want them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So because obviously you wouldn't want to buy their names again if they've opted out to you, even though the mailing house, the people that give you the data have permission to give you that data, but if they've opted out with you, you can't buy their name back again.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to set them up as a record and set them up as non-mailable, so that you supply that to the mailing house as a suppression list for those that you're buying.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. The next question in the chat is from Kay. I'm happy to ask the question for you, Kay, but please shout up if you want to. So Kay asks, what online platforms are people using for online raffles? So this is perhaps a question for the whole room. I'm sure Paul is aware of some. I will happily share. We use raffleplayer.com, which is CFP's platform for our raffles. We've used them now for, if it's about 12, 18 months. From my point of view, setting that up is really, really straightforward. And we run that online raffle alongside our paper raffle. So we do both sides. We sell online and we also send out mailing packs as well. Does anybody else want to share who they're using?
Susie, I'd love a chat with you at some point if possible.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We're kind of really, so we do a paper raffle at the moment, and we're really struggling to find a platform to integrate, and then actually how that looks for us operationally as well. So I would really love to pick up a chat outside. You seem to be where we want to be with a hybrid option.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or anybody else that's got any tips on hybrid options.
Feel free to get in touch. Also, if you visit raffleplayer.com, our raffle it's not live yet, but it's on there. We start selling tickets from next Monday, and there's usually some others. So there's been some nationals on there in the past, so it's worth having a quick look at. And if anybody knows of George from the Lotteries Council, he works for the company, so he's very open to working with hospices as well. So hopefully that's helpful. If anybody else wants to, oh, there we go. Gloria's just shared that they use WooCommerce, the raffle plugin. WooCommerce is their online shop platform, so that's what they're using.
I have a few clients that use WooCommerce, and some, I'd have to look up the name of the other ones, but the most successful ones are those that just integrate it into their own website, so that so the client that I mentioned that has the total virtual raffles and use the API for that, they have now used their our API and their website, so that as people sign up for a lottery play, they enter their details on the website. They take debit card details to cover the first 5 weeks. Upon success of getting that payment, it then sets up a direct debit payment with Secure, I think it is, a direct debit agreement, and it then pushes that information into DonorFlex. So that player is set up with the £5 credit and all the direct debit details, and then their website polls Secure. So every time a payment comes in, it pushes it straight into DonorFlex. So they're not having to do anything. The plays get set up and the money goes on. So seeing that that API in action is fabulous.
So with regards to our own website, we're finding real problems with payment providers not wanting to support gambling. Stripe being one of them, actually. So I think WorldPay do, but they won't take on any new clients. We do have a WorldPay account because we use it on our shops, but we don't use it on our website. So we're coming against some real difficulties around the payment providers not accepting gambling, which obviously,
I've
and
heard
then
that.
the problem with them not being able to just take debit cards.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I've also heard that the same organisation has told one client they can take payments and another client they can't. So it's
Exactly that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I can absolutely agree that we get mixed messages when it comes from payment providers, and I think sometimes it depends whether you have been with them for a long time or if you're just approaching them as well. But keep battling because you will find something that works. We have an issue with our website and compatibility issues. Our website is got a review coming up, which is why we went to Raffle Player, because they host it and do everything for us and we just receive the details. So it takes that work away from us as well. A couple of people have posted someone else using WooCommerce. Laura is using web forms on their website and they use Stripe. Laura said they contacted Stripe directly, who do allow gambling for charities. They check every year because it makes them nervous. I absolutely understand that. Evie's using WillPay for lottery payments and for raffles processed through Lottery Master. Okay. Starvale is being used as well. So yeah, there are options out there. So this chat will stay live, I should say, after this session. So if anybody wants to pick up each other's details to further discuss anything, please do use the chat. We always keep the chat open as long as possible. Is that helpful for now, Kay? I know you've still got a bit of work to do, but knowing that there's options available, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm just frantically typing down some notes.
Brilliant. So Gloria, Gloria, do you want to ask your question out loud? I can read it for you if you prefer me to. I'm going to put you on the spot because
Okay.
I know that you're there. I've seen you. So
You've seen me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So I had two questions. The first one is, could you give us some examples of how to measure different mailing packs? For example, the color palette got my attention. How did you measure these differences?
So we set up segments for them. So for every mailing, we would have a heading for that mailing, and in the example I showed, it was S26 for the summer 26, and then we would have groups. A segment code for each of those groups. So we'd have a blue segment and a yellow segment and a red segment, and because those segments are attached to the books that are sent out, so as the mailing comes back, we ask the mailing house. We'd often ask the mailing house to randomly pick the people to send their mailings to, the different colours, so that it was totally random from us. But we would ask them to send back the codes for which packs they'd sent out, so that we could load that into the database and therefore be able to see how many of those packs went out and how many of those packs came back and what the average purchase of tickets for those packs was and what the average donation for those packs was, and if necessary, how many new plays we got from those packs. And it's only by coding the packs so that you know who had exactly what, not